For most of the 2000s, if you asked someone where the world's factories were, the answer was obvious. China. Made in China became the global default. But in 2025, something strange has happened. While the US and China have been busy throwing tariffs, threats, and sanctions at each other, Vietnam has quietly positioned itself as the biggest winner of this so-called trade war. In the middle of a superpower brawl, this small Southeast Asian nation of just 100 million people managed to carve out a strategic, profitable niche that's now turning it into one of the most important players in the global supply chain. The world wasn't watching, but Vietnam was working. And now the results are impossible to ignore. Please take a moment to drop a like to the video and subscribe to the channel. Let's rewind to the start of the US-China trade war in 2018. Back then, when Donald Trump launched a wave of tariffs against Chinese goods, it wasn't just China that felt the shock. Global corporations started to panic. They realized they couldn't keep relying solely on China, not when every new tweet from Washington could cost them billions in import fees. But where to go? Countries like India were too chaotic, and others were too small. Vietnam, however, was just right. By 2023, Vietnam's exports to the United States had more than doubled, making it the seventh largest trading partner of the US, ahead of traditional Western allies like the UK and France. The trade routes didn't vanish. They simply shifted southward, and Vietnam became the new darling of global manufacturing. This shift is what's now widely called the China Plus One strategy. The idea that global companies can't fully abandon China, but they also can't afford to depend on it alone. So they need one more reliable, affordable, and politically neutral country in their manufacturing network. That plus one is increasingly Vietnam. Why? Geography plays a huge role. Vietnam borders China, shares much of its supply chain infrastructure, and lies directly on the world's most important shipping lanes. But more importantly, Vietnam isn't just close. It's competent. Unlike India, which keeps tripping over its own red tape, or the Philippines, which struggles with unstable politics, Vietnam delivers with speed and discipline. It's not just a substitute. In many ways, it's an upgrade. Major global players got the message early. Samsung makes half its global phones in Vietnam. Foxconn, Apple's mega supplier, began expanding its Vietnam operations to assemble iPads, MacBooks, and more, escaping the risks of US-China tech tensions. Intel, Nike, Panasonic, and LG have all pumped billions into Vietnamese factories. And this isn't some short-term stopgap solution. These are long-term strategic shifts. Corporations are not just outsourcing, they are relocating. And that means infrastructure, jobs, logistics, and supply chains are being built from the ground up in Vietnam. This investment wave triggered a massive rise in foreign direct investment, FDI. In 2023 alone, Vietnam attracted over $36 billion in FDI, a historic record. It now ranks among the top recipients of FDI in all of Asia. New industrial parks and export processing zones are mushrooming across the country, especially around Ho Chi Minh City, Hanoi, Haiphong, and Da Nang. State-of-the-art manufacturing hubs are popping up in former rice fields. And here's the kicker. Even Chinese companies are setting up factories in Vietnam. That's right. Chinese firms are using Vietnam as a backdoor into Western markets. They produce goods in Vietnam, slap on a Made in Vietnam label, and ship them to the US and Europe tariff-free. In short, China is outsourcing to Vietnam to escape the very tariffs aimed at it, and Vietnam is getting paid from both sides. But infrastructure and investment are only part of the story. Vietnam's real long-term advantage is its people. With over 70% of its population under 40, a 95% literacy rate, and a booming higher education sector, Vietnam's workforce is among the best in the developing world. And crucially, it's cheap and skilled. Labor costs are now 30% to 50% lower than China, yet productivity keeps rising. Unlike India, where cheap labor often means low quality and corruption, Vietnam's workforce is disciplined, quality-focused, and increasingly tech-savvy. The government knows this is its crown jewel and is heavily investing in STEM education and vocational training to meet demand. This isn't a one-time boom. Vietnam is building a sustainable, educated workforce for the next 30 years. And that workforce is being supported by a logistics machine that's improving faster than almost any other country in the region. Vietnam's ports and highways are getting supercharged. Haiphong, the deepwater port in the north, is now a key gateway for exports to the US and Japan. Ho Chi Minh City's logistics sector has been revolutionized with smart tracking systems, faster customs processing, and massive upgrades in cargo handling capacity. Vietnam now ranks ahead of India and the Philippines on the World Bank Logistics Performance Index, and it's climbing fast. This means goods made in Vietnam don't just get produced cheaply, they get shipped quickly and reliably, which is a dream come true for global manufacturers. Another major edge is trade access. Vietnam has done what India and even China have failed to do: sign free trade agreements with almost everyone. It's part of RCEP, the China-led Asian trade bloc, the CPTPP, the Pacific Rim Agreement that even Japan and Canada are in, and it also has bilateral trade deals with the European Union, South Korea, the UK, and more. That means goods produced in Vietnam enter dozens of countries with zero tariffs, including markets that still tax Chinese and Indian goods. This is pure trade diplomacy. Vietnam positioned itself as politically neutral, economically flexible, and highly attractive, and it paid off. And the West took notice. In 2023, the Biden administration officially upgraded Vietnam to a comprehensive strategic partner, the highest level of diplomatic relationship the U.S. can offer. This puts Vietnam in the same category as India, Japan, and South Korea. But unlike India, which is still mired in bureaucratic messes and inconsistent policies, Vietnam is delivering real results. The U.S. is now actively courting Vietnam as a strategic ally, not just in trade, but in technology and security. There are growing military ties, tech deals, semiconductor plans, and even rumors of shared manufacturing initiatives for critical goods. Vietnam isn't just an economic partner, it's becoming a pillar of the U.S. Indo-Pacific strategy. Now, here's where it gets really interesting, and maybe a bit ironic. China is still winning, just through Vietnam. Chinese companies are among the biggest investors in Vietnam's manufacturing sector. They're building Vietnamese subsidiaries, rerouting exports, and essentially using Vietnam as a proxy. So while the U.S. pats itself on the back for decoupling from China, much of what they're importing from Vietnam is still Chinese-designed, Chinese-financed, and Chinese-sourced, just made on Vietnamese soil. Vietnam profits. China adapts. The West mostly plays catch-up. So what's the bottom line? Vietnam didn't choose sides in the U.S.-China conflict. It chose success. It didn't try to become the next China. It became something else. A nimble, focused, well-governed country that understood the game and played it better than expected. While India wasted time with slogans like "Make in India," Vietnam actually made things. While China got hit with sanctions, Vietnam stepped in with solutions. And while the West was busy arguing over who to trust, Vietnam became the one they couldn't ignore. This isn't a fluke. It's a blueprint for how small nations can punch far above their weight. Vietnam is winning the U.S.-China trade war, not by fighting, but by positioning. And if this trend continues, don't be surprised if Vietnam becomes the new manufacturing heart of Asia, and possibly one of the world's next economic giants. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel for more content.